what is everyone's issue? They think that they're gonna injure themselves, I guess. It's like, just don't go as quickly. Don't try to go as fast. I don't know.
I don't either. I don't understand. Hello, we're live.
Hello, Swole Sisters!
Worldwide.
Sonny's taking refuge in the basement. He's like, oh my God.
He's like, ugh.
I've been shouting. I've had several Zoom meetings today and I've just been yelling the whole time, I'm sure.
You know, you're a super spreader probably because loud talkers are super spreaders.
I know. I did hear about the fact that if you talk really loudly, you're supposed to be, more contagious. The thing is, this is over Zoom.
Just stay a little bit further away from me.
You know what? I should get those little handheld fans and I just like hold it. So if you're in front of me, I hold the fan so it's blowing this way. And then I would talk like this.
Oh my goodness. That'd be amazing and very practical.
Very practical. Trademark.
So today, one of our fellow Swole Sisters had talked about wanting to talk about intermittent fasting. And we thought maybe that would be a good opportunity to just talk about meal timing in general, starting with some myths around meal timing. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Is it true or false, Justine?
Oh, this is too much pressure, Jen. It depends on who you are.
Do you want to phone a friend?
Well, I would phone you, Jen, but you're the one asking the question.
I say it depends.
That's our go-to.
So traditionally, I think there was like one study, and that's what all this was based off of. But there was this idea that that initial meal of the day like stoked your metabolism and got your metabolism fired up. So you needed to eat breakfast if you wanted to lose weight. And that has since been either not proven or disproven, basically.
I don't think it was ever a thing, but somebody wrote an article about it.
Yeah. And then that became a whole thing. So maybe we should just talk about breakfast to start, huh?
I'd love to talk about breakfast. I do have some experience with the breakfast.
Yes, tell us your story, because I know you've been exploring to eat or not to eat the breakfast.
Yeah, I mean, for me, at the end of the day, breakfast just really is not for me in a traditional sense. I really do not have an appetite after, or I would say before like 10 a.m. at minimum. So it's pretty typical for me not to eat anything until like 11 or noon. I am a morning person. So like, it's when I feel the most energetic and productive. So like generally my mornings, I'm just like super focused on work and like creating things. And then I'll start to feel my hunger come around like 10:30, 11 o'clock. So when I did do a breakfast eating challenge, because I just wanted to see how it would affect me, because I was eating late into the night. And so I had done some research and it said, hey, if you're eating really late into the night, try eating breakfast. And that can actually, reduce your appetite later on in the day. So I did eat breakfast consistently for about 10 days. It was very, very difficult because it's just, I have no desire to eat, absolutely none. Nothing is like appealing to me. Even like a big stack of pancakes wouldn't be appealing to me.
You love it when I just sit there and eat my beets and Brussels sprouts.
Oh my God, walking to the office is like broccoli smell. I'm like, what in the... So I did do it. And to be honest, I don't know if it was like a placebo effect, but it did seem to help me not late night snack. It definitely did help me, but the means weren't worth, or the ends weren't worth the means to me. Because I don't want to eat if I'm not hungry. That's just like, and that's what I was doing. And I was like, okay, this is like working, but it just wasn't worth it to me. And I found other ways to kind of at least somewhat mitigate my nighttime eating without forcing myself to eat breakfast. So that's my little personal breakfast story.
Yes. I've always liked to eat breakfast, and it can be any kind of weird combination of foods. So I think I can go off on a rant about not understanding why breakfast has to be dessert, but I find I don't eat right away. I get up around 5:30ish most days, and I probably don't eat until like 8. So it's not like I'm eating first thing, and I have coffee first. And yeah, I find that I like to eat. And if I were to do like a big workout, I would like, if the workout was really early, like 7 a.m., I probably wouldn't eat. But for like our Swole Sisters workouts at 9, I usually have food before then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, one of the other things that I looked into, because at that time I was wearing a MyZone and I was working out 8:30 to 9:30 in the mornings. Same class every single week. I did the same class. And I did burn more calories the days that I ate breakfast before working out.
Yeah.
And I burned less calories when I did not, you know.
Yeah. So maybe you had more energy for your work.
Yeah. I felt honestly like my workouts 100% did feel like I could feel that I was more energetic after eating like a balanced breakfast.
So that, like considering what your goals are helpful when you're thinking about whether or not you're going to eat breakfast, because if your goal is performance based and you're working out in the morning, then you may want to consider like making sure that you have food, because your performance in the gym or performance for running, for training for a race or something might outweigh other things.
Totally. Yeah. And for me teaching that class, like I didn't need to, it was body pump. Like I had been teaching it for years. Like I didn't need to be like upping my, sorry, I have to let Ruby in. I didn't need to be like upping my weight or, you know, as long as I could be like friendly in the class and like say the cues. I felt like it was enough.
Yeah. Like going to one of our crazy dragon boat workouts might not have been as doable. And then another myth that is out there around meal timing is how often to eat. And there was a time when it was recommended that you eat every 2 to 3 hours and you eat small meals. And that once again, we have this like stoking the metabolism idea, and that each time you ate, like eating food burns calories, like digesting food. It's called the thermic effect of food, or TEF. And so maybe that was why they thought like, oh, the more frequently you eat, the more your metabolism speeds up because of that. And that is another thing that is just going to depend on person to person. So I will say that I have some experience with that, because I did this thing, one of the very first diets I ever tried, well, probably the second. I think Atkins was the first diet I ever did.
Same.
Butter. Was
bacon.
Yeah, was this thing called Body for Life. And you ate 6 meals a day, and you wrote down your plan for your 6 meals the next day. And then you wrote down what you actually ate. And every meal had a source of protein, carbs, and fat. And it was helpful for me. And that's where I got in my head that hunger was the devil. So I did everything I could to avoid getting to the point where I was hungry, because once I get really hungry, I have a hard time controlling what I eat. So then that it helped me reduce my calories because I wasn't hungry and I didn't overeat, but it also created this like fear around hunger. And I still kind of deal with that, like hunger being an emergency. Like say I'm working at the restaurant and I don't have time to eat, I'm like, I have to eat something. I'm gonna be okay. I could go another couple hours without food if I had to, but like, so it kind of created a little bit of like disordered eating, I guess, around that.
You feel like that wasn't a thing before you did that diet?
Maybe it was, but I just wasn't as aware of it.
Yeah, because I think that, I mean, you know my story too, but it's like, I think that that to me sounds like it's like a scarcity mindset around food, which is like, we have like this deep seated fear that either like there's not going to be enough, or somebody's going to like take it away, yeah, I can totally relate to that.
And then I think this is where it's very individual. Now I find I don't like small meals because they don't fill up. And I just prefer a larger meal. So I'm not going to do the frequent grazing, because like an apple and almonds, like I try it when I'm hungry, but I'm still fucking hungry after I eat an apple and my little 600-calorie pack of nuts because like the food has not filled my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do well with 4 larger meals, like 4 medium-sized meals, personally.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it just really depends on like it really just depends on the day for me. I don't know. And I think that, the flexibility and kind of the theme of what we've talked about so far is, like Jen said, it really depends. It depends on not just who you are, like biologically, like what is your like history, right? I mean, like what is that? Like, like what your grandparents and great grandparents ate is going to affect like,
epigenetics, is that what
yeah,
that? All right.
yeah, is going to affect that. I mean, so like, and like Jen said, your fitness goals, like what are you trying to accomplish or achieve, or like what kind of life are you trying to lead is going to make a big difference. And I think that, one thing that I love now looking back, and it reminded me when Jen's talking about her experience with like the 6 meal a day, is like, if you can look at these, we go on these like diets, and like diets are now like very demonized, like, and I mean, I've done it, it's like diet is not a lifestyle, like whatever, but there can be valuable information gathered from
Right.
doing some experiments, especially if you're not, if you feel like food is controlling you and you're not like really controlling your food. It can be helpful because like even that observation Jen made where she's like, just was able to see like, oh, like I have this fear of hunger. Like that's really helpful to know that. Like,
Yeah.
right. Like Jen says, like that was probably always there, but it hadn't been brought up to the surface. So as much as like, I'm not going to recommend anybody like necessarily do any of these, diets or experiments, but I'm just saying like, if you can look back at those that you've already done or approach a new way of eating as like an experiment, I think it can be really helpful as long as, you're in a good headspace.
Yeah. And you just realize there's nothing magical about any of it. If fat loss is your goal, and that does not have to be your goal, a caloric deficit is going to win. And there are just many ways of getting there. And that might mean for you 6 meals a day. That might mean 2 meals a day for you. It's just going to depend if that's your goal. So yeah. And then was there one other myth that I wanted to talk about? Oh, the nighttime eating. Yeah. Let's go to night. Don't eat within 2 hours of going to bed or you will turn into a gremlin. That's it, right? No, that's why don't feed them after midnight.
Are you thinking of the troll that lives under the bridge?
No, Gremlins, the movie.
See, that's another one I didn't see.
Referencing movies that Justine hasn't seen because I am older and wiser.
You are.
Never Pretty in Pink.
I mean, what's going on with her hair? I don't know. I don't know if I can take her seriously with those outfits. They're so intense.
She's in Riverdale?
Yeah, she's the mom.
Yeah. Anyway, so eating dinner late. Sometimes it just has to happen. Justine and I were talking about our lives, and it's very well before COVID. It was very rare that I was home before 7 p.m. So I need to get home and eat and shower and be in bed within like an hour and a half. All this has to magically happen. So yeah, sometimes it just wasn't possible.
And also, like, is all of Italy just like, what I mean? In other countries, like they don't even eat till 10.
Yeah,
they stay up later, but
for a year, and legitimately, like they eat late.
Yeah, so it's like okay, it's not like the Italians are, all well, they did have a rough go of it, but that's not related. But I'm just saying, like, that it's just when you look at it from outside of like this perspective, and like you look at the world, it's like, of course, that doesn't make it doesn't make a ton of sense. I think it really depends on like how did you grow up, and also for me, it's like comes down to the pressing question is always like, how does it make you feel? And I just know for myself, if I have a calorically dense meal within an hour of going to sleep, I probably am not going to sleep great and I'm going to wake up with a little bit of a tummy ache. And like that, I just know that. And do I still do it sometimes? Yeah, totally. I still do it. But like
it's not
last
like
night,
that food just like turns into fat overnight, like all of those
right.
calories.
Here's the thing. If you eat, like, you know, if you're eating late into the night every night or the majority of evenings, chances are if you stop doing that, like maybe you would sleep better. Like you could try it and see, you know, you might not even know that you're not sleeping great until you do have a nice, good night of sleep. And then you're like, oh my God, this is so much better. Right. So it's like, it just depends on like what you're experiencing. And I just know that for myself. I don't like that sour feeling in my stomach when I wake up. And I know that that happens with calorically dense meals and not like a snack. Like if I have like some pretzels or something, that's fine. But like if I eat, you know, ice cream or pasta or like something like, you know,
Heavy.
whatever, heavy, yeah, that's not going to be great for me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people associate eating at night with gaining weight because of what they eat at night.
Correct.
And why they're eating at night. So a lot of times it's not based on hunger or need for food, but it's boredom or discomfort or anxiety, and it's eating excess calories that you don't need. So maybe it's that assumption of like those particular calories make you gain weight, but it's like, oh, those are just calories that you didn't need that day, and that's why maybe you're struggling.
Yeah. And I think that so many people, and I'm going to say, especially women, put off their own needs all day. And then once finally it's nighttime, the kids are in bed. I think it's like a little bit of like, finally, and now I get my time. And then, you know, there is like a level of like pleasure, you know, that goes, and pleasure eating. There's nothing wrong with pleasure eating just to eat because things taste good. But I think that like, when you're running around all day and like chasing kids and bringing kids here and like, and then you have your own work and maybe you're in school too or whatever, and you're, you know, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, and then all of a sudden it's like quiet and you're like, you have that time to yourself. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense why people have that habit in place. And it's not a problem unless it's like making you feel bad, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Don't make something a problem that isn't a problem. Just with the word should or something in there.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think. I had a few other little, then the last thing is the
Intermittent
fasting.
Okay, yeah, we wanted to talk
buzzword.
Yeah, and you know, we've kind of talked about it a little bit when we talked about whether or not to eat breakfast and whether or not to eat late at night. Because one style of intermittent fasting is a daily fast. So that means that you have a window between your last meal and your next meal the next day that you try to keep. And that's going to be anywhere from 12 to like 16 hours, depending on the person. And that could be meaning that you delay eating in the morning, or some people will finish eating earlier. They might finish eating at like 5 o'clock. And so one thing that I've noticed almost every single time I've seen recommendations for intermittent fasting is the number of hours between meals for women has been shorter. So it might say 14 to 16 hours for men and 12 to 14 hours for women. So both of us kind of looked into that a little bit. And what have you discovered, Justine?
Well, big surprise. It's a little different for women than it is for men. I mean, it's so funny that like, I don't know, it just still like cracks me up how that's how it is. But I mean, I think that like in our quest for like gender equality, I think it's easy. It doesn't mean that we're like less awesome because like we have these differences. You know what I'm saying? It's just so funny because I think that there is this idea of like, oh, so we can only go this long, like F that, I'm going to do the full whatever the man can do, I can do. It's like, we just have different biology. So basically,
carry children.
Exactly. So I have this article and I just don't think that it's going to make sense if I just like read it. But basically even short-term fasting, like even 3 days a week, can alter hormonal pulses in some women. And like even just skipping or even like missing just like one regular meal can put women in this like hormonal like alert, basically like perking up. The way that she describes it is perking up our antenna, so our bodies are ready to quickly respond to the change in energy intake if it continues. And so like basically you're in this heightened state, and it can cause issues metabolically. It can cause like missed periods, even like just very what would be considered like pretty limited fasting can really mess with women's bodies. But I love it because we should post this article. It's such a great article because
Yeah, we can post it.
she's like, you know, she goes, it would be nice to find a human study to illustrate the science I've been describing. But like I mentioned, there aren't any. And I think that that's such a great point, that just to drive home in a broader sense, like the studies that you see on like Good Morning America often are very small, like under 30 people. They're college graduate students. So they're also like a very specific, like demographic and
Typically
age.
typically men too.
Yeah, so it's like it's just a little frustrating because oftentimes we really think we're getting this great health advice, but really it's not really for us. Yeah, what do you want to add to that, Jen?
Well, I just think over and over again, what I've been seeing is that women's bodies don't respond well to extremes in energy intake or lack thereof. And long periods of intermittent fasting could be considered an extreme. And one thing that I liked in particular about this article that it mentioned is maybe you don't care about your reproductive health because you're like, well, you know, I don't want to have kids and I love missing my period, but that is a symptom of your body not being in a great place. So it's not, regardless of whether or not you want to have a baby, this is your body saying that it's not healthy enough to do that. And that I don't think is a great sign.
Just posting this article on the page right now.
Oh, thank you. And then she did talk about some contraindications for intermittent fasting. Like if you're pregnant, it's probably not a good idea to do. If you have a history of disordered eating, intermittent fasting can create this like really obsessiveness about like the time that you start to eat and the time that you stop eating, and that can affect like social life and all kinds of things, and you might start to push that time further and further, and it could turn into a disordered eating situation. If you're chronically stressed, it might not be a good time because it could be more stress on your body. And if you already don't sleep well, because when you're needing that recovery, then that might be a good thing to do.
Such a good point. I did put in my notes, intermittent fasting is not like, it's so easy for that to, you know, the whole idea of like binge restrict, because that is, you know, a form of disordered eating where you are, you know, you lose control and end up taking in like way more calories than you need to the point that you don't feel well. And then you're like, okay, now I'm not going to eat for this amount of time. It's like, that's not like when you do eat during intermittent fasting, you're not like stuffing yourself like to the point of being overly full in preparation for your fasting time. Like you're just eating normal meals. And I think that that's really important to realize. It's not like, it's not like you're like going to Denny's and getting like, you know, $30 worth of food because you're like, oh shit, I got to stop eating in 30 minutes. Here we go. Right. And I think that that needs to really be highlighted. It might sound obvious, but I think that a lot of people see that like this feast famine. And I think that that is like super problematic. And I can't speak to men's experiences. I really can't, or every woman's experience either. But like, I'm just speaking for women that I think that like, I think intermittent fasting could be a really slippery slope for a lot of people, especially if you have like shame or any kind of like emotional things happening around your food intake. I would just be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are some benefits to it. There are lots of potential health benefits. But as Justine and I were talking about, we were wondering about who those health benefits, who those studies were on. Were they on men? Were they on women? She had a study with mice, and you know, they had similar diets, but one was restricted in when they ate, and they had, better blood sugar and, better heart, like reduced risk of heart disease, all these things. But we don't know if those were male mice or female mice or a mix, or if there were different scenarios for them. But speaking of like getting used to hunger, intermittent fasting can be a way to, like, for those of us that struggle with hunger, for us to kind of experiment with it and like start to realize that it isn't an emergency, yes, to the extreme that could become disorder eating, but it could also be like a little like getting comfortable with discomfort, just like working out and getting used to that discomfort of working out, getting used to like feeling a little bit of hunger, and then maybe it doesn't become such an emergency when you eat, and you can make a little bit better decision for your food.
I agree. And I mean, I say this again and again, and I hope it doesn't seem like an oversimplification, but it's like, it doesn't all have to be so loaded. Mm-hmm. And there is a way to sort of step back and just see this is like, as like data. I mean, when I think about it like a yogic way, where like when you're, in pigeon and you're having this sensation come up in your hip, like, how do you respond to that? Like, that's a question that we, in yin yoga, that's part of the practice. Like, how do you respond? Like, notice, are you trying to like, are you, like trying to avoid it? Like, think about something else, or are you obsessing over it and you're like, I want to get up, I want to get out, I want to get up, right? It's like, or do you just say, oh, I'll just grit my teeth and bear through it? Or do you accept and just are like, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. This is just what's happening right now. Yeah. It doesn't say anything about me and who I am. Like, it's just like, oh, I'm having this sensation. So as much as, because I think feelings are important, but I mean, I see it the same exact way. And when I have been going through these changes where I feel just so much more trusting and safe and, like around my food intake, which I never felt that way before, a lot of my practice really has been like, just see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, when I get really, go ahead.
I said curiosity
mixed with compassion is where it's at, and I know it sounds really clinical, like just be the observer, like treat yourself like a science experiment. And it's not that you do that in a cold way where you're like, it's not like that. Like, everything is taken into consideration. Like, oh, like, interesting. Like, I got off the phone with my mom, and even though I just ate dinner, I'm suddenly like really wanting some food right now. Like, and just getting to know the difference between wanting food and like hunger, because those are really two separate things, and they get really confused. And like Jen's saying, if you never allow yourself to feel actual, like the hormonal hunger that comes from your belly into your mind, and you're constantly just eating because either like, this is just the time I eat, or, like it's lunch, or, whatever the case may be, you're just missing out on, like, I think it's just, there's just another layer. There's another depth there that you could get into, and you might not care to do that, but
yeah. And then when it comes down to like whether or not intermittent fasting is this like fat loss miracle, you're potentially eating fewer calories because you're having fewer meals.
Yeah.
So it still comes down to a caloric deficit. Oh my God.
Because most people, like, so let's say you're the kind of person where after 8 o'clock you sit down, watch Netflix, and you polish off like a bag of Ruffles, which are delicious.
Plain Ruffles?
With just plain potato chip Ruffles. You know what I'm talking about, Jen. Okay. Jen knows.
They don't make those in the small bags, Justine.
I know. Why?
Let's write Ruffles. I'm gonna get on a campaign.
We're gonna start our own protest. Sorry. But okay, like, so say that's your thing. So if you say to yourself, okay, I'm not gonna eat after 8 o'clock, it's not like you're then going to take those Ruffles. Most likely, you're not going to take those Ruffles and be like, well, I need to get my Ruffles in. I'm just going to eat them at 4 p.m., right? You're not going to do that. You're just going to not eat the Ruffles, right? So that entire, let's say 500, 600, 700 calories is now not in the budget that day, and you just didn't eat it. And so over time, you will most likely lose some body fat because of that. So like Jen is saying, it's just an example of kind of the simplicity of, I hesitate to use the word simplicity, but just the calories,
Yeah.
It's a caloric deficit at the end of the day. And I know that some people are in a position where things are a little more complicated than that, but that's as far as I'm going to go.
Yes. Yeah. So basically all of the things we discussed today is just you figuring out what works best for you. And none of them are like the best, because it's all going to depend on the person. So if you want to experiment, I would do it. I would give it like a full month if you're trying something before you make a decision, unless you're completely miserable, and then just, screw it and don't do it.
Yeah. And being, just having some calling into question these like things that you hear over and over again since you're little, right? It's like the breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's like a lot of this stuff, like our moms or dad just like said to us, or you read it, in a Cosmo, like when you're 13 and whatever. It's like, it's amazing how many of these things that we really believe, we just take for granted as being like, well, yeah, of course. Like really question that stuff. Like, where did you hear it? Like, is it true? Is it true for you? Like, is it, maybe that's just for, so like, I think that Jen and I, one of the things that I hope that we invoke in the community here with Soul Sisters is like, investigate, like be questioning, like ask why, or like, is this true? And don't just listen to the freaking diet culture machine that is out there on social media now, just like spitting out all this stuff that is just basically designed to hook you in, it's like, and massively oversimplified, which is partially on us as consumers, that, we don't take the time to really look into the efficacy and the, of a lot of what we buy into. We're just like, this sounds good. Or like, this is promising me, a new life, it's like, that's partially on us. Like we need to be better consumers and more responsible, in that way too.
Yeah. I think good talk, huh?
I think so. I feel great. Look at this background, Jen. Do you like this?
I do like it a lot. Do I look really smart with my bookshelf?
Yeah, Jen, way to try to show off your books and how nerdy you are.
It's like Harry Potter.
I know, the Harry Potter one is like the most prominent one. No, there's some scholarly reads.
No, all my scholarly books are over there.
Mine too. I got a whole stack of them.
I'll face the other way next time.
My scrolls.
All right. Well, cool. Feel free to share more questions. And like I said, this was a suggestion from somebody else. So we're always happy to try to talk about what you guys want to hear about. So tell us.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Justine.
Bye, everybody.